For me, it starts when I was 18. I went to India as a young traveller through Asia and through Thailand, through Burma, and then through to India and up to Nepal, like a young traveller. And I went to the Calcutta Museum. And in the Calcutta Museum, there was a big area on the history of cannabis use in India. And there was some cannabis fabric. And as a young man from New Zealand, it was just amazing to see some cannabis fabric. And then all the other uses of cannabis, the seed, the bung, the hash, the textiles, and the medical component. And so this was in the Calcutta Museum when I was 18, so it's a long time ago. And so that really opened my eyes to realise there was more to cannabis than smoking pot, because I was just growing up in New Zealand in the 60s and the 70s, and it was a real time of social change. And so that was my first introduction to the fact that cannabis has other uses other than inebriation. And then early in 2002, when New Zealand considered the first...
We went back before that. If you went back to the sort of late 90s, that's where we sort of came together and started our hemp journey. So...
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, yeah, we, as Mark says, we started our relationship via starting up a company importing hemp textiles and hemp T-shirts from China.
Yeah.
And that was in the late 90s. We'd heard about hemp fabric.
Yeah, in the mid-90s. In the mid-90s, my wife and I started the first hemp shop in New Zealand. We had jeans and bags.
Yeah, that's correct.
What was the shop called?
It was called Nature's Force. And so that was 95.
Hemp shop was 95 down at Vic Park Market in Auckland.
That's how Nick and I met.
Vic Park.
Victoria Park. There were some famous markets back in the day.
Yeah.
Auckland.
Yeah. And
we were featured on TV. We had it on Nightline and things like that. This hemp.
Wow, that would have been huge back in the 90s.
Well, I think I've got the recording somewhere, So, and that's how Nick and I met.
And I saw Mark on the media, so I went down to meet him at his little hemp shop. And we got chatting. We thought, okay, let's go into business together, as you do.
Full of dreams of hemp going to take over the world.
And then, so we went back, and in those days it was only fax, there was no internet, and so we found a list of phone numbers of Chinese companies that had hemp in their name, or the Chinese version of hemp in their name, the translated version, and we started ringing them and faxing them, and then finally one day we got a fax back from a supplier in China who could supply hemp textiles and hemp T-shirts, and so then I jumped on a plane, went up to China, went into the back blocks of China and found the hemp factory.
China was only just opening up in those days, so it wasn't, Westerners weren't really travelling into those areas very much at all.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a interesting place to visit at that time, and then we ordered our first shipment of hemp T-shirts, which came down to New Zealand.
Yeah.
And then that flowed on to hemp fabrics and hemp textiles, etc., and that was the birth of Hemp Tech, our natural fabric company.
I've never seen any clothing textiles made out of hemp in the flesh, but I've seen it on videos. So I understand that it's really soft, but it's ultra durable.
Yeah. It can be. Hemp can be either very coarse, like rope-like, or it can be very fine, very soft, and like a very fine linen. So it covers the whole spectrum.
Right. Yeah, it can have a lovely sheen to it.
I understand it's hollow.
The fibre is hollow, yes it is.
Yeah, it is. And it was really the fibre that fueled the phase before the Industrial Revolution, block and tackle. So it was very common back in our history because it's one of the strongest bast fibres, if not the strongest bast fibre. And so it's hard on machinery for processing, etc. And as Mark says, if you get a very fine, long strand hemp fibre that's well processed, you can have beautiful fine fabrics, and they are very hard wearing and have a lot of good attributes to them. Yeah, so that was the start of our relationship, and then we built Hemp Tech up from there. We expanded out into other natural fabrics, and we started with the hemp, and we built that up we were getting hemp textiles out of China. We were getting them out of Europe. We were buying yarn in China, shipping it to Europe, getting it woven, and then bringing it back down to New Zealand. We were getting it pre-processed, dyed, printed. So we turned it into quite a sort of a substantial supply chain. Then we expanded into the linens, the wools, the silks, and the organic cotton.
That's when Nic started to diversify and looking at the fibre side of the business. So the textile fabric meat side of the business was run out of Auckland. Nic was based down here, and he started to look at the composite side of hemp. Started working with Waikato University and getting funding for a couple of research programs there.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's when we started our relationship with Mac. I'd heard about Mac.
What year would have that been?
That would have been in 2000, 2001, thereabouts. And so I contacted Mac, and we started talking about the fact that industrial hemp was going to be coming to New Zealand. And we, through that, and through my relationship with Mac and talking to him, we then applied for one of the first licenses in New Zealand, along with a couple of other people. Mac would have been one of them. License, and we started doing our first trialling of industrial hemp. And once we did that, was at Tamahiri in Hamilton. And then once we did that, we started our university research programs, and we eventually did 3 PhDs and 1 master's study on the use of hemp fibres as a reinforcing structure within a matrix. Okay, so as a replacement for fiberglass. It's lighter than fiberglass. It's nearly as strong as fiberglass. And so
I've seen the YouTube video of somebody whacking an axe against the back end of a fibre hemp car.
Yes.
Yep, look pretty durable there.
Yeah, it is pretty durable. One of its drawbacks is it's hydrophilic. So it loves water. So it will soak in water. Some of our hemp fibre went into, is it Steve Bethune, the guy who's done all the Eco Warrior work?
Yep, that's
right. And he made that really cool trimaran that he sailed around the world, and it's now been sunk down in Antarctica.
Got the nose broken off.
Got rammed by the Japs. And anyway, all the floor in the cockpit was all reinforced with hemp fabric from us. Yeah, so...
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that was interesting. And so we did the research, and we were looking at building a hemp industry back then in New Zealand, the bast fibre industry. We did a lot of work regards growing of hemp fibre and the production of what's called ribbon, which is basically the bark of the fibre. And we were going to be, working with the Chinese and selling it back up to China. But at the end of the day, at that time, the Chinese industry started really ramping up themselves, and it didn't seem to be viable. And also, you need a massive amount of infrastructure to create a hemp fibre production chain.
That would scare most people off, right?
It's...
At that point in time, it's the same with the fabrics. We were basically creating a market where one didn't exist, and so that takes time. It's not always easy, and so when you're looking at creating a new market that requires millions of dollars worth of capital investments, you've got to have a pretty big appetite for risk to do that.
Deep pockets.
That's right. And so at that point in time, we had our textile business, and we sort of put that on the back burner, didn't we? Because of the.
Yeah, we put it on the back burner, and if you sort of observe what's happened in New Zealand, the industrial hemp industry has really grown into the sectors that consist of the seed and the seed oil,
and the food,
and the dehulled hemp seeds. So that's really coming of age, and there's also been people researching the use of the herds for building, and for animal bedding, but I don't know what sort of roll-on that's got. Nothing as strong as the seed and the seed oil. And then as far as the fibre goes, I'm unaware of any, real commercial operations using the fibre. It's coming more of age now through Hemp Farm. What's his name?
Dave Jordan.
Dave Jordan's doing a lot of great work, and so I know he may be starting to get to the point now where the fibre actually, they start finding commercial markets for the fibre, not just the oil and the seed. Yeah.
So we developed certainly the expertise in growing it. Those trials, provided a lot of intellectual knowledge and understanding of what it takes to grow it here and process it and do it well. And so through all of that sort of led to, the point where we are now, where we're focusing on the medicinal side of things. A few years ago.
Would you say that's your primary focus?
What you could say was basically we did all of that. We did all the university studies, and then we really put it aside because at the time we realised it was a bit of a big ask.
Mission.
To do that, and we also had a textile company that was growing and expanding, so we focused in on that. Then about 3 or 4 years ago, I heard of CBD, and initially when I heard of CBD, cannabidiol, I thought it was a bit of a Trojan horse because I was aware that they had medical marijuana schemes running in California at that stage, and I think they've been running since the
96.
Since good 10, 15 years, and at the time I thought, well, okay, it was a bit of a Trojan horse, and the fact that if you had cancer or some illness, yes, you'd want to take a little bit of cannabis to, increase your appetite. It was known that the munchies existed, and just to feel a bit better while you sort of waited to die, basically.
Yeah.
But then I heard about CBD, and so I started reading some of the research papers on it, started pulling the papers and looking at the research that was going on around the world. And I was really surprised that there was actual sort of empirical scientific basis for medical benefits arising from cannabinoids. And I was really surprised at the time. And thinking back, I'm not surprised now because I'm used to it, but at the time I was surprised. And then since then, once we realised that there was some real scientific basis for it that could be empirically proved and established on empirical levels, then we started going full noise into this sector. And that's what we've been doing since then.
Yep. For the people that are going to read this, what does full noise mean for you?
Full noise means hard out.
Yeah, focus. It means full-time attention.
Specifically, what were you...
So essentially what we had to do, we had the textile business, and so once we decided to pivot into this new sector, we had to set in motion, selling that business. And our partner in that business was due to retire, and so it was quite good timing in that respect. And so we sold that business, and then Nic's been working down here and had an office down here and been working on this subject. When we sold the business that was based in Auckland, then I relocated with my family down here, and then we set up a war room, if you like, so that we could focus in on this 110%. And then just basically then starting to build the team, build the business plan, analyse, every component that we could, and, develop our strategy. And so that involved raising some capital. This is quite a capital-hungry space. There's a lot of technology. You can have very simple...
What year was it when you were raising capital?
We raised most of our capital last year, but we had done a smaller capital raise the year before, and that combined with the money that we put into it ourselves, it got us, operational, got us in the pipeline for getting licenses in place. Nic facilitated getting licenses for the Waikato University to handle, THC and CBD in the lab up there. Also Callaghan Innovation, we did, we believe to be the first extraction via CO2, legal extraction from industrial hemp. And so basically it's just one step after the other. So raised some capital and then start building the team. And then we also got some Callaghan funding for a PhD that we're conducting or is being conducted in our own laboratory here. We have controlled drug licenses for our own laboratory. We have cultivate prohibited plant licenses for our cultivation facility. And we've also achieved an import license to bring in high quality cannabis flower from the Netherlands to fast track our research programs.
Maybe we can go back a bit, read the MAC side of it. Yeah, so back in 2002, when we were growing some of our first trials at Tamahiri, Mac came up to visit. And so we took him out to the field and he was very impressed with the
and that would have been
the size of our plants.
That would have been what he was sort of looking at, those guys there.
Because we'd grown them to be really tall and they were massive.
About 20 foot?
Yeah, they were all 20 foot, and Mac actually said he'd never seen any that big.
Yeah.
So they were.
I read somewhere where the stalks were as thick as your wrists.
You can get that. So we started importing. In those days, you had scheduled and non-scheduled plants. And so the government had a scheduled list of industrial hemp cultivars you could import, but we got a special research and breeding license, which is what someone like Mac will have as well. And we started bringing in off-schedule cultivars for our research purposes. So we grew those out. Most of those came from North America and Canada.
While you guys are doing all this, is there anybody else in New Zealand doing it?
Yeah, there was definitely a few people. There was people like Mac. There was Dave. I'm not sure when Dave Jordan started, but there was certainly
there was
certainly groups doing it because you could apply for a license. Yeah, so
and it was tough going back in those days.
It was tough going now.
Yeah, it slowly seems to be turning the corner, but 20 odd years ago, it's like. We thought we were on to the next big thing, and so it's just taken a little while. We're just maybe a little bit ahead of our time,
Yeah.
So we've had to basically survive all these years.
15-year overnight success.
That's exactly right.
Or a 20-year overnight success.
That's right. And then that's right. And so there's quite a history there, and so it's like a lot of journeys in life. You just one foot after the other, and one thing leads you to the next thing. You don't necessarily always know quite how you got there. You turn around and have a look at the history, and then that's put you there. And so really, it's just a culmination of all of those. But it started with a belief that the plant itself, the products that could come from it, had a lot of potential, and that it had been pushed underground, and that it was going to come back up one of these days. And it seems
you wanted to be there when it pops up.
And Mac really drove the whole industry. He was the one that got it opened up.
Mac was everywhere.
He was the person that actually got the New Zealand. He worked with the government closely. He worked on the regulation.
He must have invested an insane amount of time in the space and passion and belief.
So without him, there wouldn't have been industrial hemp trials.
Yeah, never knowing if it was going to pay off.
Yeah, but he did a lot of work, and it wasn't just Mac too. It could have been Richard Barge.
Yeah, Richard's been there for a long time.
We've had a lot of work.
We've had a long history with Richard,
and there was a couple of other people.
Midland Seeds came onto the scene fairly,
Midland Seeds were fairly early getting into it as well.
What year would you say?
Midland? I don't know. You have to ask Midlands, but it's not as it was. It really started back with Mac. Mac McDonald, he got it going in those early people, and I think Richard might have been one of them to get the regulations and to work with the government. And then once those regulations came through, people like us applied.
And definitely Richard's been an important part, as you know, because he's sort of been there and pushed, and he's given it a lot too. So
still very much so.
Yeah, which is great. So for us, that's right. We were sort of a lot of people, because we had the textile side going, and that was a business that was established and running. The hemp research was sort of slightly secondary to that. It was like, what can we do with it? How can we, and it, as I said before, it did lead us to this position now, where we do have some understanding of how to grow it, and so we've got some understanding now. Nic loves the science side of it. That's really his passion. I love the business side of it and the science side, but I'm not a scientist, and I don't, I've got a good handle on it conceptually, but when you start talking to the scientists and you see how excited they get about these compounds and the potential, you realise that, we're only at the very beginning of this